What you're about to see may look like a procedural argument about letters, licenses, and committee history, but at its core, this hearing will reveal something much bigger: whether the government is quietly pressuring the media behind the scenes while publicly claiming to defend free speech.
With that, I yield back.
Thank you. So I would note Senator Kim asked multiple questions about whether it is appropriate for politicians to try to pressure the FCC to silence their critics. My answer to that is unequivocally no, but that happens to be my answer whether those politicians are Republicans or Democrats. And I'd like to now enter into the record a letter dated April 11th, 2018, and it was directed to the then chairman of the FCC, Ajit Pai. And it says, "We write to express our grave concerns regarding Sinclair Broadcasting Group's conduct. This conduct affects its fitness to hold its existing broadcast licenses and its fitness to acquire even more broadcast licenses through the proposed merger with Tribune Media Company." And what the signatories of this letter was concerned about is that Sinclair had their local anchors warn the populace of the dangers of, quote, one-sided news stories plaguing our country. In other words, Sinclair spoke out against bias in journalism. Apparently, our Democrat colleagues did not like that, and in writing, they urged the FCC to strip the licenses and block the merger. And this letter is signed by Maria Cantwell, by Patty Murray, by Ron Wyden, by Richard Blumenthal, by Bernie Sanders, by Tammy Baldwin, by Tom Udall, by Elizabeth Warren, by Ed Markey, by Tina Smith, by Jeff Merkley, and by Cory Booker. And so I am going to enter this letter into the record without objection. It is so entered. And I would point out the principles ought to apply to both sides evenly.
I appreciate your comments. Can I say a quick rebuttal here? I just want to say this is another attempt to muddy the waters. Chairman Carr's threats to companies he directly regulates are not the same thing as a letter from Congress requesting an agency examine a matter of public concern. Members on both sides of the aisle frequently write similar letters. That's the proper oversight role of Congress. As one example now, Secretary of State Rubio and other Republican senators wrote to the FCC in 2022, urging the agency to thoroughly scrutinize a proposed sale of Spanish language radio stations, concerned it would, quote, silence political viewpoints. So I hope my colleagues, we stop trying to distract from the clear and present attacks right now upon our First Amendment. Chairman Carr's targeted threats against the licensees he directly regulates, and we can hear from Chairman Carr without further delay.
So Senator Kim is factually incorrect. This letter is calling for the FCC to block the licenses, to block the merger, because the Democrats who signed this disagreed with the content on that station. And the difference, I was on that committee then. When this happened, I spoke out against it at the time. And you know what? Not a single Democrat on this committee had a word to say about it. I was also on this committee at the time that Democrats tried to go after Fox and deny a routine license renewal, again, because Democrats didn't like what Fox News says. You know what? I don't like what MSNBC says, but I'm not urging the commission to take away MSNBC's license. And so suddenly, when the current administration and FCC makes comments about Jimmy Kimmel, comments that, as you know, I disagreed with and spoke out against, suddenly Democrats have discovered the First Amendment, and my request would be maybe remember it when Democrats are in power, that the First Amendment is not simply a one-way license for one team to abuse the power and the other not. Instead, we should respect the free speech of all Americans, regardless of party.
I agree with that statement you made. A lot of what you just said, I was not on the committee at that time, and I hope going forward, as I am on this committee with you, that we can work together to show that we do this regardless of who is violating, that we try to show that integrity to the process.
That would be a wonderful development. I hope so as well.
Senator Ted Cruz frames this moment as a story about hypocrisy. He reads a 2018 letter signed by Democratic senators urging the FCC to scrutinize Sinclair Broadcasting's proposed merger, arguing that Democrats only care about the First Amendment when Republicans are in power. On the surface, that sounds like a gotcha, but when you slow this down and actually examine what's happening, the comparison he's making falls apart. Here's the key distinction viewers need to understand. Congressional oversight and regulatory intimidation are not the same thing, even though Cruz is trying to blur that line. When members of Congress send a letter asking a federal agency to examine a merger, that is a routine oversight function. It happens under both Democratic and Republican administrations. It does not carry the force of enforcement. It does not threaten licenses. It does not come with a nice network you've got here, shame if something happened to it undertone. It's a request for review, grounded in public concern, and ultimately the agency still has to follow the law, build a record, and justify any action it takes. What Senator Andy Kim and others are warning about here is fundamentally different. The concern is about an FCC chair who directly controls licensing, enforcement actions, and merger approvals, making public comments that sound like warnings to broadcasters, whose content the administration dislikes. When a regulator says we can do this the easy way or the hard way in reference to a network's programming, that doesn't land as neutral oversight. It lands as pressure. And when pressure comes from someone who can end your business with a signature, that's when free speech is genuinely at risk. That's why Senator Kim pushes back so forcefully. He's not denying that Democrats have ever criticized media companies. He's drawing a line between criticism and coercion, between oversight and intimidation, between speech and power. Cruz also brings up Fox News and MSNBC, framing himself as a consistent defender of free speech, regardless of ideology. But again, consistency isn't measured by what politicians say, it's measured by how government power is used. The First Amendment isn't violated when elected officials criticize coverage they don't like. It's violated when regulators use their authority to influence what gets aired in the first place. This is where the FCC's role really matters. The FCC is not a content referee. It's not supposed to reward friendly coverage or punish critical voices. Its authority exists to manage spectrum, competition, and technical standards, not to shape political narratives. Once a regulator starts hinting that licenses or mergers depend on good behavior, the chilling effect is immediate. Journalists self-censor, executives make programming decisions out of fear, not judgment, and the public never sees the stories that were quietly killed before they ever aired. That's why this debate isn't about Jimmy Kimmel, Sinclair, Fox, or MSNBC. It's about precedent. If this becomes normalized, if we accept that regulators can send messages to media companies, then no outlet is safe when the next administration takes power. Free speech becomes conditional, and democracy doesn't survive that. The moment near the end where Senator Kim says he hopes both sides can apply the same principles going forward is actually the most important part of the exchange. That's the democratic ideal: rules that don't change depending on who's in charge, protections that apply even when it's inconvenient, and a shared understanding that government power must never be used to shake the press. If you care about a free press, this isn't a partisan issue, it's a structural one. The question isn't whether you like what a network says. The question is whether you're comfortable with the government having the ability to decide who gets to say it. If this mattered to you, don't just watch and move on. Pay attention to who defends independent media when it's uncomfortable, not just when it's convenient. Share this conversation, talk about it, and stay engaged, because the fastest way to lose constitutional rights is to assume someone else will protect them for you.